Hello and welcome to The Voice of Iron, and on this session, we'll be reading Dreams of Rain, Tape 2. The rest of my shift went by very quickly, and it wasn't a problem to wrap up the drive and float it out to the docking bay. I was thankful that it wasn't a busy night, as the bay was nearly empty, which would make loading much easier for me. It took just a few minutes before I arrived in front of my astrocar, Blue 1. She was a real beauty, custom built by me. I'd been working on her for years, using parts and pieces from the scrapyard over time to make her as perfect as possible. The base frame was from a Fomic Series Astro truck, allowing me to haul plenty more home from work with me. However, the enclosed truck bed wouldn't quite fit the drive, so I spent around 15 minutes or so retracting the storage cover and securing the drive with the truck's retractable cables before activating the bed's magnet. It was a large load, but it certainly wouldn't be coming loose anytime soon. After triple-checking my securing job, I unlocked the vessel and floated in, strapping myself into the pilot's seat in one smooth motion. I closed the door, hearing the familiar hiss of the seals interlocking, looking out of the windows on either side of my cabin before beginning the pre-flight procedure. Engine on, main power on, oxygen on, all systems green, I muttered, flipping each switch or turning each knob accordingly. The sound of Blue 1 starting up was soothing as ever, hearing the familiar hum of the engine activating and the thrusters warming up. I felt the air in the cabin cool off as fresh oxygen cycled through the vents, and the blue glow of the displays across the dash sprung to life, casting their light throughout the compartment. I checked the center console to ensure that Blue 1's navigation tape was still in and spinning. I was nearly ready to radio in before I realized something was missing. Oh, come on, I can't have lost it. Where is it? I asked aloud, searching the dash storage compartment. Nothing there. Wait. After a moment of clarity, I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small, rectangular plastic tape, with a sigh of relief. I placed the tape in the main console and pressed play, as the sound of smooth synthesizers filled the cabin. Now I was ready to leave. I turned down the music for just long enough to radio in. Attention, level 40 docks, this is Blue 1 requesting to be unclamped. After a brief moment, the controller's response crackled through the speakers. Roger, Blue 1. Clamps disengaged. Have a good night. I felt the ship shudder as she was freed, and with a push on the throttle and a crank of the music, I flew out of the bay's EMAG shield and out into the starry space beyond. I accelerated as I flew away from the pyramid, most of it towering well above level 40, a looming shadow in the rear camera as I approached the upcoming entrance to the star lane. I saw the two half-octagons that made up the boundaries of it hovering there in space, marking the entrance to the main highway towards the colony proper. A star lane really is something else. A bit restrictive for my taste, but nonetheless it must be pretty impressive for someone who's never been to a colony before. The floating guide markers are spaced about 20 meters apart, and two of these half-octagons float adjacent to each other, giving off the illusion of a tunnel in space. They're well lit and project holograms of exits, distances between important points, warnings of wrecks, and, of course, lane divisions. The general idea is that there are two halves to a star lane, and you always stay on your right side, which is divided by buoys in some parts of the star lane and in others just by a few holographic lines. The lane was fairly empty tonight, fine by me, as I wouldn't have to worry about maneuvering around heavy traffic. I watched the marker lights pass by my windows quickly as I flew closer towards Novus itself, passing one or two other astrocars flying by every few minutes. I always liked looking down over the city, watching the structures zip past as I flew. I took the star lane which would take me directly over the city center to see the most and gave a short repulsor burst to slow my velocity to get a better look at the colony below. Novus's city was always a sight to behold. Massive buildings floating in space, their structures lit by the glow of their own neon lights, and a blue overtone across the whole city, cast by the nearby Argon Nebula by which the colony was parked. Most of these buildings were once colony ships, massive, mostly rectangular vessels designed specifically to bridge out to a colonization spot and park itself there, hooking into the infrastructural grid and becoming a hotel or office building, perhaps an apartment. I flew over one such building, the faint blinking of its upper lights warding stray astrocars away from the many communication arrays placed all over its top. It was one of many taller buildings, easily over 2,000 feet in height, with many similar structures around it. I flew over the industrial district, seeing countless tubes and pipes, mechanical struts, and masses of cables, all of them larger than a housing container in width. These seemingly haphazard, almost mechanically grotesque leads and pipes were lit by many blinking red safety lights, each curve or angle accented by more lights of passing workships. I pondered for a moment on what a mess it may have looked like from up here, but in reality all those enormous cables had something to power. All those gargantuan hoses were pumping something somewhere, and each tube was connecting one vital system to another. I let out a sigh and tried to focus on the music. Such thoughts always served as a reminder of how small man really is, especially out here. Blue One passed over the housing district next, the many square, undecorated towers packed with floors, each building easily over 4,000 feet, half above the colony base and half below. I mean, it made sense. After all, 12.5 million people have to live somewhere, right? We can't all live in the pyramid or have our own housing ship. The outer city always had a fairly clean look to it. The tops of towers, the upper homes and penthouses, the garages and the like. All the cables between buildings and city traffic would obscure anyone from seeing the undercity from up here, and that was probably for the best. A new song came on as I flew over the last of the apartments, bland as they were, and passed by the hotels and shopping towers, gleaming with a variety of neon colors across their angled surfaces, in stark contrast to the gray, stony appearance of the apartment blocks. These buildings were adorned in argon blue, sharp greens, vibrant oranges, and of course, the signature purple of the Astris Resource Company. I had to laugh a little at that. The company felt the need to shine their light on half the buildings, as if the nearly miles-high Astris corporate pyramid nearby wasn't reminder enough. I turned off at my exit, heading away from the inner colony and heading towards one of the orbital towns, a few miles out, circling the colony proper. Flying on this smaller starlane proved calmer, and as the city lights became fainter in the rear view, I saw my local station on the edge of the orbital town come into view. The town was far smaller than even some towers in the colony proper, but still held many buildings, structural ships parked and tethered together to form a community. Checking the fuel and seeing I was a bit low, I turned towards the station, radioing in as I approached the angular, boxy structure. "Attention, Astra Station 237, this is Blue One coming in for refuel." After a brief moment, the controller responded. "Copy that. Pull on in." The side bay door was open on the station as I smoothly maneuvered Blue One in through the EMAG shield. I pulled her right into the fueling bay, feeling the bay's tractor magnets guide her into the proper position. I made sure my boots were on and magnetized before shutting her down, unsealing the door, and feeling the recycled air of the station rush over me. I stepped out, walking over to the hydrofuel pump before grabbing the nozzle and swiping my Astris card. I had just hooked up to the fuel port when I heard a whistle from an adjacent pump. "That's a nice ride you got there," a voice said, and as I turned to look, it appeared to belong to a young man, dressed in a gas miner's cover. Seems he, too, had gotten off shift a bit late. "What's its designation?" the man asked, seeing he had my attention. "Blue One," I replied, a bit of pride pinging as his eyebrows raised. "One, huh? She first of her line or custom?" "Custom," I replied, going a little further. "Fulmic Astro truck base, engines from a Falcon, even got a Starlight power system from a Solaris. Various other odds and ends here and there, but she's a completely custom job." Well, something to behold right there. I'm still happy with Phoenix 134 here, though," the man replied, running his hand across the sleek exterior of his vehicle. After a loud beep, he looked over and removed his fuel pump, waving as he started his Astrocar up. "See you around," he offered, before flying out quickly. My refueling was done not long after, the hydrofuel pump beeping when finished, ensuring the fuel port was closed tightly, before hopping back in and performing my pre-flight routine once more. Wasn't long before I was on the radio again, reporting that I wished to exit. "Copy, but Blue One, main entrance is near the station's front. You're headed rear," the controller said, confused. "You must be new to night shift. Request opening rear entrance. I'll take my chances on the slipstream." The voice came through for a moment, hesitantly, before reciting the Astris, "We are not liable for injury" line that was probably taped to the controller desk. So, after acknowledging him, he let me out back, and I began to fly towards my housing station via the slipstream. The slipstream is something else that non-colonists might not recognize. See, when there are a lot of large objects near each other in space, they can interfere with gravity a bit. Now, Star lanes are built and adjusted to avoid any gravity pockets that might screw up astrocar navigation. But if you're brave enough, or crazy enough, you can ride these gravitational slipstreams and save both fuel and time. I had to get a little excitement where I could out here, so I gladly plunged into the slipstream, as I had so many times before. I used short bursts from my maneuvering thrusters to guide an ease blue run through the turbulent space, passing under and around housing ships, parked wrecks, and the occasional asteroid. I bobbed and weaved through obstacles, navigating quickly before finding myself closing in on my destination. Attention, Sunset Station, this is Blue 1 approaching outer airlock, headed back in, requesting to be opened. I called through the radio, slowing my velocity as I approached the massive metal doors. Light poured through the entrance as it began to slowly open, and the controller responded, "Request accepted, Blue 1. Welcome home." That concludes today's reading, and thank you for listening to my voice.